On a day that President Biden has announced an expansion of existing tariffs on many Chinese imports. China, in response, has said it will take resolute measures to defend its rights and interests. What response in retaliation are you expecting from China? What is the worst China could do?
Well, I don't want to speculate on what the worst China could do, but we are interested to see how China responds. We have indicated to China that this is not an intention to escalate or even to confront. It really is on our side. A set of defensive measures, when taken together with the investments that we are making here in green and clean technology, is meant to create the space for our workers and our businesses to be able to thrive in the global economy and to compete in the marketplace.
While you create that space, though, Madam Ambassador, the reaction from Beijing has been real, to Kailey's point. And with your decision to not only roll out these new levies today, but keep the Trump-era tariffs in place, how is this not the start of a trade war?
Oh, well, you've got to take it back to the technicalities of what we are doing, which is conducting a review required by our statute at the 4-year mark of the tariffs. And we were required to examine the effectiveness of those tariffs in terms of influencing China to improve its intellectual property rights abuses practices and its forced tech transfer practices, and also to examine the effects of those practices on our economy. What we found was ongoing abuses, and in many cases where the practices have not subsided, that they have actually gotten worse with cyber hacks and cyber attacks. So in addition to that, we looked at the effects on the U.S. economy, and we see the harms of the non-market policies and practices that the intellectual property rights abuses are a part of, and the need for the United States to take definitive action to defend. We know that not taking action is going to allow the takeover of so many strategic sectors by Beijing that we have seen before: steel and aluminum, solar, and now batteries and EVs.
Well, I'm sure you remember the controversy this started with the Trump tariffs in 2018. Your decision to keep them in place, just to be clear, Ambassador, proves that the Trump administration had the correct approach, right?
I disagree with that. I very much disagree with that. The approach that the Biden administration is taking is one that is strategic, one that is aimed at using the tariffs as part of a policy tool set. We combine them with the investments that we are making, historic investments in the clean energy revolution, to ensure that the United States, America's workers and businesses, continue to have the space to compete and to grow in the industries of the future.
Well, that said, Ambassador, none of the existing tariffs were reduced today. There have been no offsets to the tariffs that are going even higher as a result of this review and ultimate decision. Without those offsets, how inflationary could this be?
Well, this is a question that I've heard a lot of. We don't see our approach as being inflationary. In fact, our approach is an investment in the United States' resilience, our economic resilience, and the resilience of our supply chains. That requires us to rebuild and reinvigorate American manufacturing capacity, as well as looking for diversification of sources of supply and sources of demand as well. That kind of resilience, when we build it into our economy, is going to help us avoid the kinds of price spikes and inflationary dynamics that we've experienced over the past couple years because of the supply restrictions that have come from the supply chain resilience problems, in large part because of the degree to which we are extremely dependent on China as a source of supply.
Well, Ambassador, as we talk about where supply is coming from, I wonder how you are considering supply that may actually come not directly from China, but other third world countries or third party countries, that is. Obviously, there is now a very large 102.5% tariff on Chinese made EVs. What if they're made in Mexico? How are you prepared to respond and address that specifically?
So that's a different type of a challenge. The Section 301 tariffs in action were with respect to trade directly between the United States and China. I know that This has been mentioned by many. We are all paying attention to the fact that there are Chinese industries, state-owned companies that are buying up land, establishing facilities in, to your point, third countries and looking for other ways of accessing the U.S. market. This is something that we are scrutinizing very closely at USTR.
This is obviously part of a supply and demand conversation here. And the fact is, Ambassador, if I want to go buy a Chinese EV right now, I'm not sure I'd be able to do that in the U.S. Were you anticipating a massive influx here like we've seen with other supplies? Bring us to the problem you're trying to solve.
Certainly. This is an issue that the administration has been extremely clear about in communicating to the American public, but also communicating directly to counterparts in Beijing, which is the concern that China is doubling down on its export-led model of growth to try to lead the Chinese economy out of its current downturn by manufacturing beyond the demand required in China and pumping goods out into the global market. What we have seen in the past with respect to these other industries, steel and aluminum, solar, critical minerals, is the ability for China on this massive scale to use predatory prices to drive out production in other parts of the world and then to corner the market. That is very much the concern that we and others in the global economy have, both in the developed world and in the developing world.
Well, Ambassador, there also is going to be a recommendation process for exclusions here, and you mentioned solar specifically. We do know that there are 19 possible exclusions for solar manufacturing equipment, but what other exclusions might be on the table?
So the solar manufacturing equipment, and there's clean energy manufacturing equipment that we will run a process for those who want to request exclusions. It's really meant to recognize that where we are today in terms of our resilience is not where we want to be. And to get from where we are to where we want and need to be is going to require a transition. You cannot just flip a switch. You can't flip a switch to have the resilience that you need to build towards. So that exclusions process is very much a recognition of the need to send a strong signal and to provide our producers with the ability to transition to manufacturing more here at home and having that kind of capacity. There is another set of exclusions that is set to expire on May 31. And I think that folks should look to USTR in the next week or two for announcements regarding that exclusions process.
We're out of time here, Ambassador, but do those exclusions include double-sided solar panels?
That bifacial issue with respect to solar is actually a part of a different trade program. Just to make clear, for those of us it matters, 301 versus 201, but that is something else that is under consideration.